Get ready for the roar of the engines, the smell of burning rubber.
And the scent of champagne.
Haha, right. It's almost time for the Singapore Grand Prix.
The city's about to be buzzing.
Absolutely. Now, we know you love the thrill of the race, but we're going deeper.
Behind the scenes, right?
Exactly. We're talking about the business of the Grand Prix. Who's making money?
And how?
When those engines roar.
It's fascinating, actually. We dug into reports on hotel prices.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about those hotel rates. 214% jump compared to last year. 214%.
It's wild. Imagine trying to book a room at, say, the Mandarin Orchard.
You'd probably have to empty your bank account.
Haha. Well, maybe not that extreme, but it highlights how some folks are cashing in, particularly real estate investment trusts, REITs, as they're known.
Okay, REITs. For those of us who aren't real estate moguls, break that down for us.
Sure, think of REITs like baskets of properties. You buy shares in a REIT that owns hotels, and when those hotels are suddenly in high demand, like during the Grand Prix, and jack up prices, well, your investment potentially grows.
And you might even get a nice dividend payout.
Exactly. So if you own a property with a view of the track right now, you might be sitting on a gold mine.
Uh-huh. Nice. But let's shift gears a bit here. Talk about the stock market. Any way to predict which companies are going to pull ahead during race week?
Absolutely. Now, everyone expects Singapore Airlines to do well, right? Huge influx of travelers coming in.
Makes sense.
But what's interesting is the demand for their premium cabins. That's where the real money is. It's the high rollers driving up profits during the Grand Prix.
Ah, so it's not just about how many people are traveling. It's about who those travelers are. Interesting. Who else benefits?
Companies like Genting Singapore. They operate Resorts World Sentosa.
Casinos, restaurants, the works.
Exactly. They're in a prime position to benefit from all the tourists. Casinos are buzzing, restaurants are packed, shows are sold out. It's a good time to be in the entertainment and hospitality business.
Definitely. But we're talking about the obvious ones, airlines, hotels, casinos. What about the less obvious businesses, the ones you wouldn't necessarily think of?
You're right, the impact ripples out much wider than that. Take, for example, ST Engineering, a local firm.
Okay, I know them. They're big in engineering and tech, right?
And they're deeply involved in the technical side of the Grand Prix. The track maintenance, all the complicated logistics, even the high-tech systems that make this race possible.
The behind-the-scenes heroes, making sure everything runs smoothly.
Exactly. And this isn't just about one race for them. The Grand Prix, it's like a global showcase for their capabilities, which could lead to long-term contracts, international recognition. It's a long game for them.
We're back, still diving deep into the world of the Singapore Grand Prix, the business side of things.
It's amazing how this one event, it just ripples out and touches so many different parts of the economy.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the interconnectedness of, well, everything.
It really does. We've talked about the big players, the airlines, the hotels, those lucky folks with REITs.
Right, right.
But what about your average Singaporean? Are they feeling the effects of all this?
Well, absolutely, in ways you might not expect. Let's start with something simple. Groceries. Believe it or not, supermarkets see a noticeable spike in sales during Grand Prix week.
Really? I wouldn't have thought of that.
It's not just the tourists stocking up, though I'm sure that happens too. Think about it. Locals might be more inclined to just stay home and cook rather than fight the crowds at restaurants during the race weekend.
Makes sense. Plus, inflated prices at those restaurants probably don't help.
Exactly. So you got the grocery stores benefiting, and then there's the shopping malls. Now, some malls really go all out for the Grand Prix.
Oh, yeah. Like how so?
Well, we found a really interesting example with Fraser's Centrepoint Trust. Now, they own malls mostly in suburban areas, not exactly right next to the racetrack.
Right.
But they've come up with these clever ways to still capitalize on the excitement. They'll have all these Grand Prix-themed promotions, discounts, events, that kind of thing.
So they're drawing people in with the excitement, even if they're not right in the heart of the action?
Exactly. They might even set up a Formula One simulator, something interactive and fun that plays on the theme.
Yeah.
It's all about capitalizing on the buzz, drawing in those shoppers.
Smart marketing. It just goes to show, with a little creativity, even businesses you wouldn't think would be affected by the Grand Prix can still find a way to benefit.
Absolutely. It's a rising tide, you know? Everyone's trying to catch a wave.
Speaking of waves, let's talk about the wave of humanity that descends upon Singapore during the Grand Prix. The transportation situation must be interesting, to say the least.
Oh, it definitely presents some challenges. We've mentioned ride-hailing services, but traditional taxi companies like ComfortDelGro, they see a huge surge in demand too.
Their drivers must be working overtime.
I'm sure they are. And then, of course, there's the pressure on public transportation.
The MRT, the buses.
Exactly. They're all operating at max capacity, trying to keep up with locals and tourists trying to get around.
Companies like SBS Transit and SMRT, they become even more essential during this time.
Absolutely. Especially with all the road closures and diversions in place for the race. They're the lifeline of the city, making sure everyone can still get where they need to go.
Which, with all the extra people and the altered traffic patterns, must be a real logistical feat.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that brings up an important question. Are there enough taxis, buses, and trains to go around? Or are we talking frustrated commuters and stranded tourists? We'll get into that when we come back for the final part of our deep dive into the Singapore Grand Prix.
And we're back for the final lap of our Singapore Grand Prix deep dive.
The checkered flag is waving, but we still got some ground to cover.
Right. We've talked REITs, stock market moves, even those clever mall strategies. But now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the traffic jam on the track.
Transportation, the other race happening during the Grand Prix.
Good one. So, no sugarcoating. What's it really like trying to get around during Grand Prix week?
Let's just say, patience is your best friend. Think twice as long for that taxi ride, maybe even longer.
Oh, I can imagine.
MRT, buses, yeah, get ready for some packed platforms.
It's the price you pay for all that excitement, I guess.
It is. And remember those road closures we talked about? The ones essential for the race?
Right.
Yeah, those can make a simple trip across town feel like navigating a maze.
I bet. I can see myself now, late for a meeting, stuck behind a detour sign thinking, why did I leave the house?
Exactly. It's stressful, but hey, it's the Grand Prix. It comes with the territory.
True enough. So, for our listeners braving the Grand Prix crowds, what are your survival tips? How can they navigate the transportation jungle?
First off, plan ahead. If your normal road's affected, check for alternatives. Maybe work from home if you can.
Solid advice.
And for racegoers.
Yeah, what's the best way to get to the action?
Honestly, public transport. Just be ready for the crowds. Download a podcast, bring a book.
Embrace the wait.
Exactly. And this is where technology comes in handy. Track those public transport updates, check for road closures, and don't rule out those ride-hailing apps.
Even with the surge pricing.
Hey, sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
No argument there. So as we wrap up this Grand Prix deep dive, what's the key takeaway here?
The Singapore Grand Prix, it's more than just a race. It's a snapshot of how interconnected everything is, how one event can send ripples throughout a city and economy. It's about being adaptable, thinking ahead, and making the most of a thrilling and, yes, sometimes chaotic experience.
Well said. It's been a wild ride exploring the business of the Singapore Grand Prix, from soaring hotel rates to the inevitable transport scramble.
And everything in between.
Exactly. Big thanks to our expert for breaking it all down for us.
Our pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, knowledge is power, especially when you're navigating a city gripped by Formula One fever.